we think of the holiday of Pesach, Passover, two things come to mind immediately. The mitzvah of Matza, the Seder, that a Jew has an obligation, a Torah obligation, to eat matzah at the Seder, to commemorate that when we left Egypt, we were driven out by the Egyptians, and the dough did not have time to rise. And the end product was an unleavened product, which was the matzah wafer. So to commemorate what had happened at the time of Exodus, the Torah tells us on the 15th evening of Nisan, every Jew, man and woman alike, must eat matzah. In addition, what comes to mind is the prohibition of eating Chometz, a leavened product. Not only is one not permitted to eat anything of a leavened nature if it's a grain product, one is not even permitted to possess it during the 7-day period, which is the holiday period. And if one does possess it, one is in violation of a negative commandment for every moment that he possesses it. When does the prohibition of possessing chometz or eating the leavened product come into effect? Midday on the 14th of Nisan. This is what we call Erev holiday. Midday prior to the holiday, to the 15th of Nisan, one is not permitted to possess it, one is not permitted to eat the chometz. If one does, again, one is in violation of possessing it. It is something of such a serious nature. There's a rabbinic fence that from the 4th hour onward, prior to the midday period, one is not permitted to eat chometz, just in case he may make a mistake and eat it when he's not permitted to eat it, after midday. There's a positive commandment that a Jew must destroy the chometz. If the Jew owns the leavened product prior to the period that you're not permitted to eat it, there's a positive commandment to destroy the leavened product, the chometz. There's a question, is the mitzvah, the commandment, by fire, to burn it, or means just to obliterate it, to scatter it to the wind? There's a positive commandment that Erev Pesach, before midday, one must destroy the chometz. One is not permitted to possess it. So what do? We disown whatever chometz we're not aware of, and once we disown it, it's no longer ours. However, to fulfill the obligation of destroying the chometz, we must take minimally the volume of an olive, either burn it, put it in a situation, whether you scatter it to the wind or throw it into the sea, where it can no longer be located and it's destroyed from existence. That's how one fulfills the mitzvah of destroying the chometz. We understand a Jew is not permitted to possess idolatry, because it's something which the Torah refers to as an abomination. It's something which is false on the most extreme level. It's an affront to God. Paganism. But what's so negatively wrong with a leavened product? Throughout the year, we partake of it. We eat chometz. It's permitted. But during the 7-day period, and even slightly prior, it's put into such a negative context that not only are we not permitted to eat it, we're not even permitted to possess it. And there's a mitzvah to disown it is not sufficient. One must take a certain minimum volume and destroy it to actually demonstrate one's disdain for what it represents, to put it out of existence. What is so innately negative or evil about the leavened product that the Torah puts this obligation upon us to destroy? If one eats chometz, it carries a very serious liability. The liability is not only that one is subject to lashes, one is subject to spiritual excision. If one eats on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the Torah says that soul will be cut off from his people. Identically, if one eats chometz on Pesach, it carries the identical liability. That's how serious it is. But again, this is only an indication that its representation is something so negative, it actually compromises our soul, our spirituality, which causes this detachment from the Jewish people. How do we approach to try to understand the negativity of chometz? If you look at the physical characteristics of chometz, a leavened product, the leavening process is that when you add the water to the grain or to the flour, it rises. What is the concept of something which becomes high, bloated, expands? This is a representation of arrogance, haughtiness. Also, the fermentation process, which is synonymous with the leavening process, causes it to be tasty. It's more desirable. Desire has a certain negative connotation. The connotation is it's something we're attracted to, which means it touches our desire, which could lead to other things, which are negative. This is the realm of the evil inclination. However, if you look at the physical characteristics of Matza, the unleavened product, it doesn't rise. It's lowly, which is a representation of humility, being humble. It's bland. It's a detachment. One is weaning oneself from craving for something which is desirable. It's not as tasty as the leavened product. The Torah is saying for 7 days, one must detach himself from something which is a representation of arrogance, haughtiness, something which is a representation which is synonymous with desire. That weaning process causes a certain detoxification, detachment from that type of behavior. That impacts upon us and affects us, that throughout the year, it resets our spiritual balance, equilibrium, that when we're confronted with a situation where one may act arrogantly or haughty, or one may succumb to his desire, one has an inner ability to take control and suppress that craving, and not to be drawn into something which is not permitted.